It is my great honor to introduce Rich Mulholland, and I asked you what book should we discuss. You suggested Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith.
When I read the book, everything changed. He literally finished a chapter, ran into the office like, guys. The first thing he's trying to do is to recognize that everything we learn about marketing, we learn from product marketing. Do you think people are buying the best of something, but they're actually buying the least worst of something? Transcending price as your differentiator is probably the smartest category that you could have. The worst thing you can do is to wait until you're sure. And I think that's the most important thing. If we are willing to put things out there and then learn from the feedback.
Welcome to the Nonfiction Book Club. I'm your host, John Bradshaw, and we have a great show for you today. A reminder to sign up at www.nonfictionbookclub.co.za to be the first to hear about our interviews, book reviews, and get great discounts on all our books from Exclusive Books. A big thank you to our season's sponsor, Supertube.ai. Supertube already working with some of South Africa's biggest companies to help them understand, embrace, and enable their teams with AI. You can check out more at supertube.ai/nonfiction book club. They are the people that I recommend to any company that comes to me asking for help with AI. And now for our show. It is my great honor to introduce Rich Mulholland. Rich is a brilliant person to introduce because he doesn't fit in any categories. He's a sweary, tattooed Scot who also doesn't drink or smoke, plays board games with his family on Friday nights and writes business books. I first met him when he was doing the Lord's work, helping some boring corporate presenters to become rock stars. I was totally blown away by the transformation, so I got into reading his books, which are brilliant. The first was Legicide, about abandoning your old thinking and embracing new thinking. I got him to speak to 1,000 headmasters about that, and they learned some new words that day. The second is Boredom Slayer, absolutely brilliant book on how to present. If you ever speak to groups of people, you must read this. I'm sure we'll discuss it a bit in our interview today. Especially if you ever speak to people and I'm an audience, please read this book. Here Be Dragons. During COVID, Rich put together his company Missing Links sales guide into a B2B sales manual. I actually have 3 of these at the moment. Every time they're on special, I buy them. If you're doing B2B sales, you have to read this. This is the best book on B2B sales. And then lastly, Relentless Relevance, a brilliant new book on updates on Legicide, really, on how to think, how to stay relevant with the matter at hand in the world that we're living in now, especially with AI. So he's a prolific author. He's also founded a bunch of businesses. He's a heavy chef. Every time I speak to him, I learn something. And so it's just wonderful to have him on the podcast. Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
John, thank you very much for having me. After that welcome, I can absolutely not live up to the expectations, but thanks for having me.
That's absolutely fantastic. Now, a big thank you, because when I asked you what book should we discuss, you suggested Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith. It's a book that I hadn't even heard of, but I absolutely loved. I especially loved business books that have been written. This one was written in 1997. So you had a whole lot of extra data to add to test the assumptions again. Let's kick off. Where were you in your journey when you came across Selling the Invisible?
Completely distracted. I had started Missing Link. You know, when I tell people on podcasts, if you have a listen, I'm always giving people the truncated version. And every entrepreneur tells a truncated version of their company story where they landed up at the right place with this great insight. And there's a degree of truth in that. But if you expand it out, the full truth was that presentation was one of the things that we did. But we offered so many different things. And I'd been reading the book Selling the Invisible. I knew that the service we sold was invisible. I had to convince people they wanted something they couldn't see or feel or touch, you know. And when I read the book, I had everything changed. Like Missing Link completely and utterly changed. It went from being an all-over company in which presentations were part of what we did, and to me storming into the office, literally saying to everybody, I do not care what you do. If anybody ever asks you what you do from this day forward, whichever job you're currently doing, your answer is you're a presentation strategist. That's it. Well, and I would argue that positioning was the most important lever in Missing Link's success, and was directly, literally finished a chapter, ran into the office like, guys, and everything changed. And for years, it didn't matter if they did video, interactive design, graphic design, sales, coaching, every single person in Missing Link's title was presentation strategist.
That's brilliant. That's such a clear positioning. We're going to jump into it in a second, but I guess before we go into it, I'm pretty sure that nobody listening to this podcast would have read Selling the Invisible. So do you want to give us the rough outline on what Harry Beckwith is trying to do in the book?
Yeah. So the first thing he's trying to do is to recognize that the world belongs to product marketers. That everything we learn about marketing, we learn from product marketing. But product marketing is easy because it has a voice of itself. Like I can see the quality of a Le Creuset mug, and I know it. It speaks to me. I know exactly what it is. But a service doesn't have that voice. The you have to assist with it. And he wanted to create, again, he calls it a field guide to modern marketing. And I think that's spot on. In fact, I also think, by the way, just like service companies have spent decades treating marketing for product, I think that product marketers should read this service marketing guide as well. I think it really, really does work. And why I think it's even better to read today than when it was written. I reread it for the third time, maybe a year ago, and I checked my revise on the way here, and I've got 56 highlights. That is the most highlights per book that I have in my entire collection of books I've read. And it's the third time I've read it, and it's still giving me that many aha moments.
Yeah. I mean, it is huge, and there's so many, like you say, those things that stick. One of the ones that I absolutely loved, immediately resonated, is when you're selling a service, you're competing against indifference. You want to unpack that a little bit and how that feels when you're in your position selling services to corporates.
Yeah, funny enough, I write about it a bit in Here Be Dragons. We call it Chapman's Law, named after Colin Chapman from Prospector. And it was the idea that your greatest competition is inaction. Most people don't make decisions. In fact, Missing Link's biggest problem has always been that we're competing against the status quo, not against other people who would sell presentation design, but we're speaking against, well, we can just do it ourselves. And anytime there is a worry, because one of the concepts he also talked about, I'm not sure if you remember the book, is he said that you think people are buying the best of something, but they're actually buying the least worst of something. So they want to say, what is going to get me into least trouble if I buy it?
Yes.
And sometimes they perceive any purchasing decision as a change that is a risk. And so if you're positioning the change you're asking them to make in their thinking, and if it comes across as a larger risk than just
Yeah.
staying the same, then you fail. So you have to really understand, if I'm marketing against, if my biggest competition is inaction, then that's a very different competitive statement that I would be making than if my biggest competitor is a ad use.
That's brilliant. So if you're competing against, or people just sense doing it differently to how it was done last year, that's sticking my neck out. There's a risk. I'm going to use these guys to help me with the presentation. You then speak about really identifying or creating the dragon in Here Be Dragons. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is of discovering with the person you're selling to the bigger risk associated with not using you?
Yeah, so I think that's the big thing. Like, he talks about selling the service, but actually the service is the weapon. The service you offer is the weapon, but the weapon is only important when the dragon appears. Now, some people in storytelling, they'll talk about the villain. I actually don't like the framing of the dragon as the villain, because sometimes the dragon isn't doing anything. Sometimes the dragon is indifferent. The sleeping dragon might just be asleep in front of the treasure, but you got to get past it somehow. And what we realized is that in a lot of storytelling, people talk about the hero's journey, and we talk about customer centricity, and they put the hero at the center of everything. But actually, most heroes don't move or do anything until the dragon appears.
Yes.
And so I kind of say, and I don't want to hijack this as a Here Be Dragons thing, but in Here Be Dragons, I say that you have two jobs. Job number two is you have to help the person slay the dragon, the service.
Yeah.
But job number one is you got to make sure they see it in the first place. And my favorite kind of metaphor for this, if I'm going to completely mix metaphors, is that people spend lots and lots of time selling the features and benefits of the ambulance, when in fact what they should just be doing is selling the accident.
Yeah.
If you can sell the accident, the ambulance will sell itself. And the most important thing of that is not to sell the accident for your entire category. So if I was trying to sell air conditioning units, I'm not selling it's too hot, thus it should be cold. I'm trying to sell something, a unique problem that only we can.
Because only you could solve. You picking the dragon that only your sword could slay. Well, since I read Sell the Accident Before You Sell the Ambulance and Boredom Slayer, I've become quite insufferable at repeating that phrase, because it is so true that people tend to jump ahead, whether it's a presentation or sales, they tend to jump ahead to their solution without bothering to convince you that you should care.
Right.
Right. That feels to be such a key thing.
Yeah, and for us, it's always, this is one thing I'm a crack record on, is our action framework. Step number one, you got to give them a reason to care. Step number two, a reason to believe. Then you got to tell them what they need to know, and then you got to tell them what they need to do. If you tell somebody what they need to know, before you've given them a reason to care, it's like walking up to some stranger and just randomly scratching their back. Like, it's like such a weird thing. It's like, what the fuck are you doing, bro? Like, I don't understand. Whereas if I can see somebody and they're trying their best to itch, even if it's perfect strangers, like, bro, I know how you're feeling. Do you want to be? And I'm like, yes, man. And you give them a scratch, they're like, thank you. So you've got to create the itch before you provide the scratch. It's so logical, but people don't do it.
Yeah, and I haven't scratched people's back, but the image I always use is the guys at the lights in Joburg who clean your windscreen.
Yeah.
Before you've won it, you're like, whoa, like you first got to convince me that my windscreen is vegan. You can't clean my windscreen and then ask me for money. It's the wrong way around. I wasn't in the
market for it. Yeah.
I wasn't in the market for it.
That's probably a better metaphor. That I should get away scratching other strangers' back.
A scratcher.
Although I just need to stop this metaphor kind of thing, because we've gone from dragons to accidents to back scratching to cleaning windows. But
Yes, it'll teach people a lesson for trying to listen to us at 1.5.
One of those should have landed for you.
Yeah, yeah, pick the one. One of the bits I really liked from selling the invisible is this idea that what you really sell in a service is a promise. This is why a brand is so important, that you literally have nothing when you hand it over. I mean, which I guess is why trust is so important. How have you applied this idea in your businesses?
Take, for example, 21 Tanks. Okay, we would go into companies and we solve an innovation-based problem for them. And it's very, very simple. So we sell them a promise at the beginning, and the promise is at the end of the interaction. So we charge like between 100 and 150,000 Rand for these interactions. They're 90 minutes long. And I would say to them, it's okay though, but there's zero risk for you. There's no need. The first question I ask them is, if we solve this problem for you, how much will it be worth? And then they'll give me a number. And I say, cool. So if we do get it right, then 150K, that feels like a no-brainer. Cool. At the end of the 90 minutes, and you tell us how far towards the solving problem we are, and whatever percentage you tell us, that's how much we bill you. And if that means that it's less than the 50, we've got less than 50% of the way there, and therefore we have to give you back money in the deposit you paid us, no problem and no questions asked. And so that, by building that promise, and I mean, that's a very literal promise. It removes any barrier. But again, the kind of promise the missing link will make is that we promise you that when you stand onto a stage, you will be presenting yourself as the best version of yourself. And we believe that we can absolutely make you look better than everybody else is on stage with very, very little work and effort. And so if we're making those promises to people, we've got to keep them. But that is something compelling to most humans. Standing on a stage and looking better than the other speakers feels like worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of terrifyingness as part of that process. It almost feels like improv, that when you're coming up with idea. I guess it's slightly easier to imagine that, pretty much for any corporate presenter, you give them good slides, you give them some good coaching, you give them a structure, he's going to be better. But when you're solving ideas
in reverse order.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree.
In reverse order, but with the 21 Tanks business, you really are backing the fact that the process always develops out. So I think it's extraordinary. I mean, one of the things you immediately mentioned is pricing. And one of the things I've appreciated about you is how you think about pricing, how you always talk about pricing. Beckwith in his book talks about this problem of the middle and the dead middle. Whereas, can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so Beckwith's theory is that in the middle is the messiest place you could be. And in the middle of the pricing, if you're the cheapest person, if we are selling, there's a guy, so I've actually seen there's a competitive brand to this, and they're selling basically, cheap, fake Le Creuset mugs. And their market is for the people who want this kind of aesthetic, but they don't want to pay the top dollar, they'll do this. So cheap.
Because they're not for Instagram or something.
Yeah, good enough for Instagram. It's a position, you can buy it, you're saying all the right things, and you get in brand association. On the top end of the scale, you've now got this mug, which is expensive and got a cool brand association with it, and you're paying for it. In the middle, you've got every other mug that exists. And there, it's like there's nothing to it. It's just such an uninteresting differentiation to have. And so he does argue that pricing, first of all, if you're going to price on the extremes.
Yes.
If you're pricing on the cheapest, it's an indefendable position, and it's a very short-term gain. It's honestly, unless you think you can sustain it, it's not worth playing for. But actually, transcending price as your differentiator is probably the smartest category that you could have. Working under the assumption that most people probably aren't positioning themselves as being the most expensive. So if you're in the middle, if you're not going to be the most expensive or the least expensive, then price is not your conversation. Then something else is.
Something else is your conversation.
And that's the interesting thing to look for.
And I love his nudge that value is not positioning.
Yes.
right? Like your positioning is the other stuff, and then people say, how much is it?
Yeah.
Right. Once you've shown the bill.
What is it? What's it? I don't know if you read Confessions of a Pricing Man.
Yes.
And he says, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Yes.
And so what that presupposes is, as the buyer, I get the vote on value, not you.
Yes.
You get the vote on price, I get the vote on value, and we've got to hope that the truth is what lies beneath.
Well, it's why your framing on finding the dragon, or whichever metaphor we're going to stick with there, is so key, because you're really trying to frame it in a way that shows the value in the most valuable way before you get to the 100% price. So one of the stories he tells about is Jay Chiat, the founder of Chiat Day, who had a slip of paper in their pocket that said, maybe he is right. Right, just carry that slip of paper. And it reminded me of something I heard you chat about. I think you call it epistemic hubris. And this humility that we might be wrong about something, which Beckwith feels like is really important. But one of the things that comes with complete confidence, never thinking you're wrong about anything, is the confidence to act.
Yeah.
Right. So I wondered if you had any perspective on how you get that conviction of action while keeping the humility that you might be wrong.
The easiest way to do that, and in fact, this is something we push in our Voice for Authority program and Story to Stage, is the worst thing you can do is to wait until you're sure. Beckwith, not in this book, but another book, he says certainty is your ego moving in for the kill. And I love that, right? It's absolutely true. But we wait for certainty. And certainty is a bad position to be for any kind of voice of authority, because almost everything I say, I go out to audiences all the time and I say, I may be wrong about this, but let me offer you a point of view about something. And that gives me all the permission to fail. And next week I'm putting out a video on diversity, and an idea that I'm kind of going to war with. And again, completely unfully formed. This was, I had this thought, I shot the video, and I put it out there. And I think that's the most important thing. If we are willing to put things out there and then learn from the feedback.
Yeah.
If you start seeing social media as a feedback tool, and I think my argument for the most part, I think LinkedIn in the business context is the best one for this.
Yeah.
If you I put up a video last week and a lady said, I disagree with you about this and it's brilliant. And now we having a great discussion about it. That's fantastic. If I see myself putting up this as trying to defend a point of view, well, then I've lost at the moment I begin, because of course not everyone's going to agree. But if I see myself as putting something out there as a place to test the hypothesis of my ideas, and every bit of feedback, good or bad, is great. And I think that's true in business as well. So epistemic hubris is basically filling your world with people that basically tell you you're correct. So if you jump onto one of these social networks like Truth Social, and you surround yourself only with people who saw the world your way, then you're not doing a good job of vaccinating yourself against groupthink. And I think that's deeply, deeply, utterly problematic. But as a business leader, I think not being willing to share unfully formed ideas and not being willing to be proven wrong about things is probably what's holding most people back from thought leadership.
Yeah, there's a really interesting perspective that Jeff Bezos has. One of the leadership principles for Amazon is leaders are right a lot, right? They are correct a lot. And he, in a talk, said, I've noticed something about leaders that are right a lot. They change their minds a lot.
Yes.
So it's that humility. But you've solved one of the riddles I have. Most people who write books then cannot withstand the drive of confirmation bias to force fit everything that happens in the world after that into their structure. So is this engaging on social media, throwing those ideas out, how you manage to keep these ideas from trapping you and leading into confirmation bias?
During COVID, I started relooking Legacy, thinking, it'd be nice to rewrite another version of it. And I read it, and I was staggered by how many things. It might be like the corporate, just like Selling the Invisible. What's wonderful about old books is the only thing that can stay are principles.
Yeah.
And in Legicide, I think the broad-based principles about most of the ideas, like I stood by, but the delivery, the case studies, the things, and in some things I just thought, no, I don't believe that anymore. And in fact, the original premise of the book, when I sold it to New Holland Publishers first, they actually pitched me and said, we'd like you to write 3 books for us. And I pitched the idea, and the original name of this book was called Sell by Date, and then the date. And the date was 3 years in the future. And it basically said, and the contract I had with them said that they would never be allowed 2 years in the future. They'd never be allowed to sell the book after 2 years. because every idea I presented in the book was no longer valid 2 years later.
Yes.
So
That.
invalidation was built into my thinking in the book. So when I wrote Relentless Relevance, it was originally Legicide 2.0, but then I also realized even the idea of Legicide, I felt like needed changed and reframing and things like that. And so through the process of that, it became Relentless Relevance, which has echoes of Legicide, but it ended up becoming its own thing.
Yes, and I mean, Relentless Relevance is such an interesting book for the moment we're in. So I'd love to chat about it a little bit. I'm so chomping at the bit to get and keep talking about your books. But is there anything more about selling the invisible as you think back to those 58 notes that you had that you find yourself repeating with your team, or really has become a core principle to the way you think?
Yeah, the greatest marketing edge is simplicity. The greatest marketing tool you had in your arsenal for anything is simplicity. And if you look at your positioning and you look at your marketing and the word simplicity does not echo from that page, then you're failing to use the greatest tool. And let me tell you where this is powerful. So, first of all, the second time I read this book was the most depressing thing in my life. Because the first time I read this book, it just blew my mind. The second time I read this book, I was like, oh shit, I had no original ideas. Everything I thought was my original idea, I had learned from this book. Like, I didn't realize how prescriptive it was and how it was shaping how much it shaped me as a book. When I read it the second time, maybe in 2010 or something, I was like, whoa. And then when I read the third version, or the third time, again, it just blew me away in that regard. But that simplicity thing, it was as if he reached out of the book and said, if, simplicity is the greatest weapon, you're not using it, Richard, you idiot, punch you in the face or the throat. That's how I felt. Like I wanted to mail him, we become friendly over the years. I wanted to mail him and say like, Harry, geez. And I'll tell you what's happened is what they have in software, they call feature creep.
Yes.
And service creep is a very real thing because I hate the term cross-selling. I think it's bad if people don't like being sold to, but I love the concept of cross-servicing. Yeah, cross-servicing is, well, we can do this for you, but we can add more value and serve you in a better way. And at the beginning, our positioning of presentation strategists made a lot of sense, but it's actually murdered us because we've applied ourselves too broadly in this case. It was good for them, but it's no longer good now. And when I read this, I realized we have to go back to the simplest story. We now believe we actually took every proposal we have, we popped it into Claude, every proposal we've ever written, and we said, what is the main thing?
What is that?
This is that people actually hire us for.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of every proposal, missing link, right? So it says the requirements for the job are as follows: line, and it says the overall objective is this. So we just analyzed that. It didn't even matter if they'd hired us or not. It's just what did people come to us for? And the number one thing was some degree of change management. And I thought, shit. It's taken us 29 years to realize that we thought we were in the business of presentation strategy, but they thought we were in the business of helping them move people. And so if we were to and it's not fully dialed in yet, but if we were to fully position ourselves going forward, the simplicity sword that we would do would be change communication, for example.
Yeah.
And the reason I tell you this is I think that the people who need to read this, there are two groups of people that need to read this. People who are new into the service marketing space and people who are very old in it. Because, and I would argue that the people who are very long in the tooth, they've had very successful services that they've grown for years and built a reputation up. They're the ones that will have service creep. And that service creep is absolutely muddying the waters for you. And that was on the third reading, that was what I took away. The greatest marketing weapon we have is simplicity. Act accordingly.
I think that's fantastic because it's easy to say we're too complicated. As a business, we're too complicated. But I remember having this debate with some fellow executives to say, why are we complicated? We're complicated because we hate saying no to customers, right? And so customers say, could you? Oh, yeah, we could. And then 10 years later, you step back and you've lost your way. You don't have the simplicity anymore. You don't deliver at the quality that you once did in nailing that because of the service creep. So I can absolutely, it's the complexity comes out of a good heart. It's not idiots managing the business badly. It's just saying yes to a customer, which we love doing. But the job of leadership is to focus the business strategically, even at the expense of serving every customer and every need. And that's why I think it's so hard to be focused, to avoid service creep. It's because it actually requires you to say no to customers.
But what and I'm going to mess up this line, but what Beckwith says in the book, he says, when you narrow your focus, you widen your market, which is such a counterintuitive line, but it really is, because when Missing Link started, we worked only with corporates, largely in the financial services industry. That was our bread and butter. And actually, there are thousands of financial services companies we could work with. But one of the biggest missteps I made is I said yes to Pick and Pay, to Coca-Cola, and to Tiger Brands, and to all of these amazing companies that have been so wonderful for us. And thank you to all of them. But what I probably should have done, and this goes to, when you ask me what book, I was fighting between two books, because the two books I always recommend to people is Selling the Invisible and Your Business Brickyard by Howard Ness. And this was the one that was nearest in my brain. But in one of the chapters in Your Business Brickyard, he says you define your business by what you say no to.
Yeah.
And you need to be ruthless about your no's. So when we started Missing Link, it was no entrepreneurs. We would not work with entrepreneurs.
No.
Entrepreneurs spend budgets and
Yes.
money
Money versus budget.
budgets. But also, this is going to sound absurd and it'll age us, but we would not do a project less than 5,000 rand. Which now, let's say by today's terms, that might be 50,000 rand. There's no point in inviting a proposal for something.
You're the same size hammer, whatever the size now.
Yeah, and it should be actually 500,000 rand or $50,000 or whatever the case may be. But we've got to redefine the no's of our business in order to get the hell yes that we want to get to the sharp end of that simplicity.
I mean, it's so this narrow your focus to broaden your market is something I intuitively felt with people selling to me at Pick and Pay. When people came and they said, well, we could do all these services, I'd be like, yeah, but if you can do all of those and I haven't heard of you, then you know one. But when they came as hyper specific, as I said, we only solve this problem and only on Tuesdays, I'd be like, well, do you think you could do it for me on a Thursday? Yeah. Right? I would naturally broaden them. I would pull them across because they had that legitimacy that comes from owning a small space.
And he did a great job, if you remember in the book, of kind of saying that. He said, everyone is worried that they'll close down their market when they say no to lots of people, but people find you.
Yeah,
and marketing only to financial services doesn't mean you have to only serve financial services. I can market only to financial services. And then if somebody from FMCG comes to us and says, listen, specifically what we're trying to do now, and this, say, change communication, things like this, we really believe you can help us. And they're going to figure it out.
They're going to find you. And look, I know you are a hockey fan. I don't know if this metaphor travels, but I'm a cricket fan. And what cricket commentators love is very esoteric facts. Like, this is the best bowling performance from the Weinberg end against a left-handed West Indian in a 5-day test in the summer, right? And they get really narrow like that. And I always felt like when you pitch like that, you leave the other person the job to pull you across. And I think this idea that it's the job of the buyer to tell you where the problem is, to tell you where the dragon is, which is why I absolutely loved in Here Be Dragons, which you've shared with the world, so I'm not giving away state secrets, your dragon finding question.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing the thoughts? It's your dragon finding question. I think
it's very, very simple. It's the first question. I always go through like a little bit of, hey, everybody, what are we hoping to achieve today? Blah, 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 blah. This is the way we're going to run the meeting. I end with usually the line says, and then we're going to decide if we're going to do business together. How does that sound? And they say, oh, that sounds great. And they always say that, right? Nobody's ever turned around and said, oh, we're not going to do business together. And then I turn and say, okay, but before we get started, just because I want to understand, because nobody wants to jump on a Zoom call with some idiot in Isle of Man anymore. Why was this the right time for us to have this discussion? And it's there's like often a moment of awkward silence because they realize, well, shit, they've got to admit to why it is. So I say, and there's two parts to the question that I think are really good. Why was this the right time to have this conversation? And the one solves for the problem, but the other solves for the urgency. And so both of those questions, and sometimes I'll say, oh, well, we just got that email from your team and we thought it was interesting. And then I just had to say, oh, which part was it?
Yeah.
Which part was interesting enough for you to want to chat today?
Yeah.
And they can't remember the mail. I'll say, well, go through it. It was about this. And then they'll say, okay, yeah, it was really this. I said, oh, why does that matter to you? And then they'll tell me. And then the easy follow-up question is, what's at stake for you if we don't solve this?
We don't solve that. I mean, it's such a brilliant question because it's so innocuous. But the only way to escape telling the supplier what your problem is to say, well, I have lots of time and I meet randos.
Yes.
Right. Like that.
Or like some people might say, I saw you in a speaking gig once and I liked the opportunity to chat to you or something. Nobody will ever admit to that. Yeah. So people will make up the most intelligent sounding reason. And the great thing about the human brain, the moment they have done that, it's locked into that.
Yeah.
So the moment they've uttered it, they may not have thought of the answer to that question ever in their life before, but the moment they've stated it
Yeah.
to you out loud, they believe it as if that's the
And the
reason.
reliable consistency will try to make that.
Yeah, what's his name?
Cialdini.
Cialdini, the consistency bias, influence.
Yeah.
That Cialdini consistency bias is so powerful because humans want to stay consistent. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, we're almost out of time, but I did want to get into relentless relevance. I mean, you've got a brilliant question at the heart of that. What is the matter at hand? Which I find myself asking in a lot of situations. But I really wanted to pick on something I've heard you say about AI. Right? And apologies if it's a misquote. You can correct it. But this idea that we must use AI to do things we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, things that are beyond our reach, then become in our reach, rather than to just do stuff we could do already easier. Is that do you want to give me the right quote there? Have I got the essence of it?
Yeah, the essence of it is absolutely right. Is that a lot of people are using AI to do what they could already do faster, and I thought that was relatively uninteresting.
Yeah.
I want to use AI to do something that I couldn't do before at all, and it's just becoming increasingly easier and easier to do it. By the way, I'm not saying that you shouldn't also maybe use it to do certain things faster. But why would you not be exploring what you could do that you couldn't do? Like, that's the most interesting thing, is what is now the realm of possibility? What can I make today that I could not have made yesterday? We're at the other side of infrastructure inversion. Now, we're on the new floor instead of the old ceiling, but we're acting as if we're not.
Yeah.
And I think there's a window of opportunity at which this exists. And there's just such cool stuff you could do so simply.
But I found it such a good challenge because as I followed those thoughts through, I can see if you keep automating your life to make it easier and easier using AI tools, the end result is you sitting on your couch watching customized Netflix with a universal basic income. Yeah, like that's like the nirvana. And if you keep trying to do harder and harder things, well, there's the chance to be superhuman and do things that were completely beyond, that's a really exciting future. So it does feel like there's this polarizing fork in the road for those people who are brave enough to go through the discomfort of learning and relearning and learning. And then there's this other group, a mix of non-users and people who use it just to make their life easier.
Yeah, and I think you hit on such an important concept there. That is the incentive problem why most people's staff are not embracing AI. And actually, Mark Sham doesn't know. Mark, I'm pitching you for a talk next week because you're my home ground on this kind of future of work idea.
Yeah.
But it's, I realize that we have an incentives problem. If you go to everybody, you say, you can just do your job easier. Well, if we're not paying them more or giving them more time off, if you're not saying, if I say to my staff, you can do, you can make more presentations, what do they care? What's in it for them? There's literally no incentive for them. In fact, there's a negative, perverse incentive, which is, well, either you're going to make me work twice as hard. Every job has a certain units of stress with it. The actual doing of the job is easier, but the stress load is higher. So now instead of dealing with 5 clients a month, I'm now dealing with 20 clients per month.
Yeah.
Because I can, and there's no benefit from.
So
The second problem around it is that, well, then, 50% of the team might be laid off, and this is a genuine concern. But a missing link, that's why we said to the guys, because they weren't embracing fast enough. So we said, I do believe that the greatest risk that you can have in the world going forward is a single source of income. I think in the future, people will not have single sources of income, a job 5 days a week. So we kind of took Ford's mindsets that the world has got easier, therefore we can work less, because he obviously changes from 6 to 5 days. And we said, okay. And his incentive was, I need people to have a day off so they can drive a car. And so that was very interesting. Ours was, I need my staff to fill their gas tanks, their give a shit tanks around this AI tool, and they're not going to do it for me. So we said, take 5 days off every week. We'll pay you exactly the same and start your own companies. And so they started, use AI. But of course, all we get is now they go work for Missing Link, which they're kind of sunk cost invested in.
Yeah.
But now they go work for themselves so they can, if you only work in a business 1 day a week, you have to use AI.
Yeah.
We get and our clients get all the benefit of what they learned on Friday from Monday to Thursday. But we gave them an incentive. And the only thing is do better. This idea of just, do it faster. What a shitty incentive. It just doesn't make sense to me.
And it's amazing to me, and that resonates 1,000%. And some of my career, I've worked 4 days a week in order to keep 1 day a week for the side hustle. And I wonder if maybe, like in the 90s, ping pong table and foosball tables and maybe even free tattoos were the way to have a really great work culture. For me, it feels like the way to attract top talent now is to say, we have an expectation. We don't pay you for 5 days and you work for 4. Pay you for 4 and work for 4. But on that 5th day, we want you to hustle. We want you to come pitch in the hustle. You own the IP. We have ways of bringing that in. I think you'll just, even just as an employee value proposition, you'll attract the best people into your business. I think it's extraordinary.
And I heard a thing recently that blew me away. It was the guy who created Cloud Code for Anthropic.
Okay.
If you want to listen to a really cool episode, it's called Lenny's podcast.
Yes, I know Lenny. Right?
And Lenny interviewed like 3 episodes ago the head of design for Cloud Code. And he said the biggest attraction mechanic they have in the world today, and as a guy who's loving this vibe coding stuff, I totally understand it. It's unlimited API credits. And if you, like, I was thinking, like, what a great perk for people to say, hey, and by the way, on Friday, every Friday we'll give you $50 of API credits to build your own business. Like, incentivize them to do this cool stuff that they bring back to you. So it was free lunches, like you said, 20 years ago. It's free API credits.
Wasn't it great? What a great filter on your application forms to just say, if you're successful, would you like bottomless coffee, free lunch, like you pick one, or free API credits, just as a way of filtering people in.
Oh,
You could get your idea catcher out.
yeah. Please add John's idea from the podcast to the new keynote. I think it's brilliant.
Wonderful. Well, now that you've affirmed me, we have run for our time. Rich, I feel like we could speak for hours. Thank you for getting your thoughts down in the books. Thank you for bringing Harry Beckwith into my life. Really, really found it brilliant and just so fun to talk with you. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for listening to the Nonfiction Book Club. Hopefully you enjoyed that and got 17 new books that you can read. Remember to sign up to our newsletter at www.nonfictionbookclub.co.za to get the interviews, the book reviews, and discounts. And a big thank you to supertube.ai. If your business is working out how to apply AI, you should have a chat to supertube.ai/nonfiction book club and say John sent you. Happy reading.